Hello and welcome back to Steam It with Steve. Today's the last video in our tutorial series where we're going to unpackage what interface design looks like. So let's jump on in. So the learning intentions for today are to identify and evaluate key elements in making good choices for your designs. We're then going to develop an understanding of the elements such as colors, sound, and gameplay, and then analyze the pros and cons of selecting the right tutorials for your final product, which is going to be your game. So in this, there's two choices that you need to make when you're looking at your different images. So there's raster graphics compared to vector graphics. Now, what happens is if you do raster graphics, basically that's where every pixel is painted in and then changed based off a hex code. And depending on the resolution, depends on how it looks. So if you have a high resolution image based on pixels in a raster graphic, it looks fine. But then if you blow it up, sometimes you might get this blurred image. That's where vector graphic comes in. So vector graphics are based off mathematical equations. So you can draw a vector graphic very small and then blow it up on a billboard and it will still look exactly the same. Now the trade-off with this is raster graphics are really good for photos, whereas vector images are more clip art sort of based imagery. And that's why there's the two different Adobe products of Photoshop and Illustrator. So Photoshop's built for raster graphics, whereas Illustrator is built for sort of navigating through vector graphics. Now, when you're building games, if you can choose the vector option, it does make your game a little bit more lightweight. And then that's awesome because then it's easy to install on computers and get that running. So some things that we need to think about when we look at the hardware for the design that we're building, we need to consider what is the screen resolution, how big is the tablet that we're working on, or is it on an actual PC? What is the interface? So is it a keyboard? Is it a touchpad? Is it a mouse? All those things need to be considered before you go off and actually start building. You then need to think about what type of software you're going to be using. So is it on Mac? Is it on Windows? Is it on PC? Does it work alongside something? So does it work inside the Chrome browser? You need to consider all these different things before you start building. So how are iPhone, Android phones, laptops, tablets, and PCs different? And then how are they same? They're the same. So you need to consider this. So tablets between iPhone and Android, there is a lot of similarity there, but then the interface might be slightly different. So you need to consider that when you're building your product, particularly with the Pygame, so that it is able to work properly on the right device. So luckily with Pygame, most of it's just going to be on a laptop or a PC, so that should be pretty easy to do. What do users want in an interface? So have you considered what actually needs to be behind the scenes when you're building your product? And then you need to think about the principles of this interface design. So when you're thinking about it, you need to engage the user. So do they actually want to use your product? Is there communication, sharing, and enjoyment in what you're doing? Is there ease of navigation? So can they get from A to B quite quickly? Is it simple and clean? So is it all cluttered like some of the things we've seen before? Is it user-friendly and intuitive of what they're going to do? Are there links to the relevant website and social media that they need? And then is there effective search functionality? So if they're not quite sure, can they search something up and then work out what needs to happen? Can they sign up and register? And is there privacy control on the information that's given out? Those are all the things that you need to consider. Now, Adobe released this as their principles of app design, and there's a little link there that you can play with. And these are the 4 golden rules they came up with for UI design. So 1, place the users in control of the interface. So don't try and take any control away from them. Make it comfortable to interact with a product. Number 3, reduce the cognitive load. So if they open up the app or the game, can they just get in and start playing or doing what they need to do? And lastly, make the user interface consistent. So keep the same color scheme, keep the same fonts, keep the same sort of layout that you've used so that the user doesn't get confused with what you're trying to do. Cool. So with number 1, to unpackage that a little bit further, when we place users in control of the interface, we need to make sure the actions are reversible. So if they forget something, be forgiving so they can jump back. We need to create an easy to navigate interface that provides visual cues that people can choose, and then the level of predictability so they can understand what needs to happen. They need to be able to provide informative feedback and be acknowledged, show the visibility of the system status, and accommodate users with different skill levels. So you might have pro users that can fly through the thing, and you might have some people that are still sort of learning and finding their way. The next one, with making it comfortable for users to interact with the product. Make sure you eliminate all elements that are not helping your user. Don't ask the user for their data that they've already entered. Avoid jargon and system-oriented terms. And then apply Fitts law, which is basically making sure if you've got a touch phone, for example, your finger movements don't want to be going all over the show. They probably want to be more towards down the bottom. So when you're dealing with interactive elements, make sure that the design, the interface be accessible by the user. Use real-world metaphors so people understand. Engineer for errors, so if the user is going to do something silly, help them be protected, and then protect the user's work so they can be saved as they're going. So Fitts law, like what I talked about before, states that the time required to a target is the function of the distance to this and the size of the target. This means that having a better designed large target is more important for functions, so bigger buttons are basically easier to interact with. So then we also want to reduce the cognitive load. So for example, if we have a phone number, breaking up by using area code brackets and then hyphens between with groups of 3 or 2 letter numbers makes the easier for people to read. So chunking for sequence of information or actions, reducing the number of actions required to complete the task, recognition for overall recall, provide visual clarity, and when designing the layout, avoid visual clutter, make things look like they work, and then group similar items together. So there's a nice little website there that's before and after. And you can see that it's been decluttered, and then the image is a lot easier sort of to unpackage and know what is going on with the news report there. So it's quite simple to do, but then it's still a little bit, it's effective. Then we want to, number 4, make the user interface consistent. So when we do consistency, we've got to make sure that it's clear what the person's sort of dealing with. So visual consistency in the style, the functional consistency, the behavior. So if you click on a button, what happens? The consistency of the user expectations. So follow the platform conventions, don't reinvent the patterns, and don't try to reinvent terminology as well. So make sure if it says follow this for the email, don't say something a bit quirky where it's like the electronic mail. Or you need to make sure it's consistent so people can pick it up and get their head around what needs to happen. So some conclusion questions to think about. How can elements of good Pygame tutorial interface can help with the success of your game? So make sure that it's clear how there's the links. What aspects of game development do you find most challenging so far and why? And discuss how the skills you learned today can help with your future game development when you're building the GUI that helps load your game, for example. There's a little Kahoot that's attached there that hopefully will help you go through it. And yeah, that's pretty much it from me. So that's the last lesson. Hopefully that's given you enough foundational skills with Python and designing to be able to build your retro game if that's where you're sort of heading with. The whole purpose of this is to make sure that people can see that you can build some really cool stuff quite easily in Python and get your head and hands straight into building something awesome, which is what I'm really hoping. And it's accessible for everyone and it's free as well. That's what we love. So if you have any questions, please put them in the comments down below. Please like and subscribe as it does help with the YouTube algorithm, trying to promote the use of Python out there. And yeah, that's it for me. Hope you've enjoyed the series. And yeah, it's been a real pleasure sort of going through all this with you guys. Thanks again, and see you on another project, which I'll try and put together on Steam with Steve. Adios.